They drilled a metal post into my dock. Not just any post, a blood-red no fishing sign with the HOA seal on it, right on my property, without warning, without permission. I was supposed to accept it, swallow the humiliation, and move on. But instead I gave them a choice: pay to swim, pay to dock, or leave. What happened next turned a quiet lakefront into a neighborhood battlefield, exposed a power trip gone way too far, and dragged the unthinkable into daylight. This one got wild, real fast. Let me walk you through it. Leave a comment if you've ever dealt with HOA madness. I'd been living the dream for 18 months in this quiet lakefront community in northern Georgia. Every evening after work, I'd grab my fishing rod, walk down to my private marina, and just breathe. The marina wasn't anything fancy, just a small wooden dock extending about 30 feet into the lake, with a couple of boat slips and a tiny storage shed for my fishing gear. I'd spent weekends over the past year adding personal touches: a comfortable bench where I could sit and watch the water, solar-powered lights that created a magical ambiance at dusk, and even a small cooler built into the dock for keeping drinks cold during those long summer fishing sessions. The previous owner had clearly loved this spot too. There were still hooks screwed into the shed walls where he'd hung his equipment, and the dock showed signs of careful maintenance over many years. But it was mine, completely within my property boundaries, and absolutely perfect for watching the sunset while casting for bass. The lake itself was spring-fed, crystal clear, with a healthy population of largemouth bass, bluegill, and the occasional catfish. I'd caught my personal best, a 6-pound bass, right off the end of my dock just 3 months after moving in. No meetings, no deadlines, no neighborhood drama. I specifically avoided meetings and all the gossip that comes with suburban living. When neighbors tried to rope me into discussions about landscaping disputes or parking violations, I'd politely deflect and change the subject. Looking back, maybe that was my first mistake, staying out of things when I should have been paying attention to what was brewing in our little community. But honestly, after spending 8 hours a day troubleshooting network issues and dealing with demanding clients, the last thing I wanted was more conflict in my personal life. Tuesday morning, I step outside for my usual coffee and sunrise routine, walk down to the marina, and there it is, a bright red sign planted right at the edge of my dock: no fishing by order of HOA. The sign wasn't just stuck in the ground either. Someone had driven a metal post deep into my dock's planking, probably damaging the wood underneath. I actually rubbed my eyes like some cartoon character. This had to be a mistake. I mean, seriously, did someone really think they could just waltz onto my property and ban me from fishing at my own marina? The sign was professionally made too, not some hand-scrawled note, but an official-looking prohibition with bold lettering that you could probably read from 3 houses away. Laminated, weather-resistant, with the HOA logo prominently displayed at the bottom. Someone had clearly spent money on this declaration of war. It didn't make sense at the time, and honestly, it still doesn't make sense now. I stood there like the dock had vanished beneath me, coffee cooling as disbelief rooted me in place. My neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, hurries over from next door looking nervous as hell. She's probably in her 60s, retired school administrator, usually keeps to herself, but has always been friendly when we chat over the fence. "Reed, I'm so sorry about this. Last month, Colleen, that's our HO, a president, she fined the Johnson family $150 for leaving their patio furniture out too long, 36 hours instead of the 24-hour limit. She actually took time-stamped photos every few hours to document the violation." Mrs. Thompson's voice drops to almost a whisper as she continues. She's been getting more aggressive lately about enforcement, something about maintaining standards and protecting property values. I think she's just bored and looking for problems to solve. My stomach sinks. This isn't about fishing regulations or community safety. This is about someone who gets off on having power over other people. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting at first, but Mrs. Thompson's expression, part sympathy, part fear, told me everything I needed to know. I call the HOA office around 9 a.m., figuring this whole thing is just some bureaucratic mix-up that can be sorted out with a simple phone conversation. 20 minutes of getting bounced around. "President Williams is in meetings. She'll call you back. Very busy with community issues right now." Classic bureaucratic stalling tactics. The secretary sounds harried, like she's fielding complaints all morning. Finally, after being transferred 3 times, a different secretary who sounds genuinely scared whispers, The sign was a direct order from President Colleen Williams. "I'm sorry, but that's all I can tell you." The way she said it, like she was afraid someone might overhear her, even giving me that basic information that should have been my second warning sign. When your HOA staff is afraid to explain decisions to residents, something's seriously wrong with the power dynamic. I knew this wasn't a mistake. I didn't have the full rulebook in front of me yet, but something told me they had no right. That evening, right as I'm grilling dinner on my back patio, there's a sharp knock at my front door. Not a friendly neighbor, not the kind of authoritative rapping that usually means bad news. I open it to find a woman in her 50s, hands planted firmly on her hips, wearing an expression that could freeze lava. She's dressed like she's heading to a board meeting, crisp blazer, perfectly styled, hair clipboard in hand. "Mr. Reed, I'm Colleen Williams, HOA president. You need to understand that the phishing sign is there for community safety and aesthetic standards." Her tone suggests she's doing me a favor by explaining this obvious truth to my apparently dim understanding. But this is my private marina, I say, keeping my voice level, despite wanting to match her aggressive energy. It's on my property according to my deed. The HOA has management authority over any area that affects community standards and property values. You really should have read your homeowner contract more carefully before purchasing. She turns to leave without waiting for a response, like this conversation is already over in her mind. I wish I could tell you I kept my cool completely, but come on, who wouldn't want to snap at that kind of arrogance? I stand there watching her walk away, biting back about 50 different responses that would have made this situation much worse. Her whole demeanor screamed power trip, the way she stood, the dismissive tone, the assumption that I should just accept her word without question. From across the street, I notice Richard Patterson, the quiet elderly neighbor who keeps to himself standing in his driveway, shaking his head as he watches the whole interaction. Richard's one of those guys who's probably seen every type of neighborhood drama over the decades, and even he looks disgusted by what just happened. At least someone else thought this was as ridiculous as I did. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining her walking back into my yard, clipboard in hand, claiming ownership of the lake itself. I started checking my doors twice. I wasn't scared, just aware, like I'd been circled in red ink without knowing it. That night, staring at my ceiling and listening to the lake water gently lapping against my dock, I keep thinking about that sign. It's not just about fishing anymore, and maybe it never was. This feels like a test, Colleen pushing boundaries to see how far she can go before someone pushes back. I realized that if Colleen could change my entire world with one stupid sign, then maybe I could change hers the same way. And I already knew how. It started with a sign, one she wouldn't see coming. I cracked open the HOA packet for the first time in 18 months and started reading. The deeper I went, the worse it got. All 47 pages of rules, bylaws, and regulations that came with my house purchase. Multiple pots of coffee eyes burning from screen glare, but I read every word, every subsection, every footnote. The documents were written in that special kind of legal language designed to sound important while saying as little as possible. Phrases like, "whereas the community desires to maintain harmonious living standards," and "pursuant to the covenants herein established," the kind of language that makes you feel like you need a law degree just to understand your own property rights. Looking back, I should have done this research before I even bought the house. But who actually reads all that legal fine print when you're excited about lakefront property? The realtor had glossed over the HOA stuff, focusing on the amenities and property values instead of the potential for bureaucratic nightmare scenarios. Those plastic tabs from closing day, thought I'd never touch them again. Now they were tabs on a war file. Most people probably toss them in a drawer and forget about them until something like this happens. As I read through page after page of regulations, I started to understand the scope of what I'd unknowingly signed up for. Rules about mailbox heights, acceptable, paint colors, lawn maintenance, schedules, holiday decoration, time frames, even specifications for outdoor lighting fixtures. It was like living in a suburban prison with very detailed guidelines for acceptable behavior. There's absolutely no specific rule prohibiting fishing at private marinas. I searched for fishing down, marina or dock, waterfront activities, nothing. The only relevant language is incredibly vague stuff about maintaining community standards and preventing activities that disrupt neighborhood peace. These are the kind of catch-all phrases that weak leaders use when they don't have actual authority. Section 4.7 was particularly ridiculous. Residents must ensure all outdoor activities maintain aesthetic harmony with community values. What the hell does that even mean? Who decides what constitutes aesthetic harmony? I draft a professional 2-page formal notice citing specific regulation numbers and requesting written legal justification for the fishing ban within 7 business days. Polite, respectful, but unmistakably firm. Maybe I should have just walked away at this point. I don't know. But something about Colleen's smug attitude made me want to push back. I actually spent an hour designing a protest poster, "Stop Colleen's Power Grab," with her photo next to the ridiculous fishing sign. I even printed it out in full color, complete with bullet points about property rights and HOA overreach. Then I sat there staring at it for 10 minutes before shredding the whole thing. No, if I'm going to win this, I need to do it the right way. Part of me wanted to wallpaper the neighborhood with protest signs. The smarter part held the scissors. Instead of providing legal justification like any reasonable organization would, the HOA sends back a single-paragraph response that reads like something from a collections agency. Failure to immediately comply with established community standards may result in escalating legal action and substantial monetary fines. Remove all non-compliant activities and signage immediately to avoid further consequences. They're trying to intimidate me into backing down. Big mistake. Seriously, did they really think threatening me would make me fold? The letter doesn't cite any specific regulations, doesn't explain how fishing violates community standards, doesn't even acknowledge that it's my private property. Just pure intimidation tactics dressed up in official language. I call my buddy Jake, who happens to be a real estate attorney down in Atlanta. Hypothetical question: if someone claims they can put signs on my private property for community benefit, could I theoretically charge them money for that community benefit? Jake laughs so hard he starts coughing. That's actually brilliant. If they're claiming management authority over your private land for the supposed good of the community, then you absolutely have the right to charge the community for using your private land. It's completely legal, just unexpected as hell. Most people would never think to flip the logic like that. Jake explains the legal principle. If the HOA claims they can regulate my private property for community benefit, then by extension the community is benefiting from my private property and should compensate me for that benefit. It's elegant in its simplicity. Think about it. Jake continues getting excited about the legal puzzle. They're essentially claiming eminent domain authority without compensation, which violates basic property rights. Your countersign isn't just clever, it's constitutionally sound. You're asserting your right to exclude others from your property, which is fundamental to ownership. He pauses, probably imagining how this would play out in court. Just make sure you document everything, Jake adds. Keep copies of all their communications, take photos of their sign on your property, and whatever you do, don't let them claim you agreed to any of this nonsense. Also research comparable marina rental rates in your area. If you're going to charge fees, they should reflect actual market value. I spend the next hour researching local marina costs online. Private dock rental runs anywhere from $150 to $400 per day, depending on location and amenities. My $300 fee is right in the middle of that range, reasonable for a private lakefront facility with amenities. That night, I wrote down every single interaction I'd had with Colleen. Not just the sign, but little things, the look she gave me last month when I declined to join the HOA newsletter committee, the way her car slowed near my dock on weekends. Maybe I was overthinking it, or maybe she'd been laying the groundwork for this battle longer than I realized. Look, I'm not trying to get rich off my neighbors or start some neighborhood war. I just want to fish in peace after work. But Colleen's threatening tone in that letter, combined with her smug attitude when she delivered the original ultimatum, something inside me just snapped. Some battles are worth fighting, especially when the other person is clearly abusing their authority. The old Reed would have quietly moved his fishing spot to some public lake and grumbled about it privately. But watching Colleen's power trip with other families, seeing how scared that secretary sounded, thinking about how she probably bullies people all over this neighborhood, no, not anymore. That night, I placed an order for a custom-signed professional quality official, looking with language that would either solve this problem permanently or escalate it into something much bigger than either of us was prepared for. Jake said it was brilliant. I wondered if it would be enough. Something about Colleen told me this wasn't her first power game, and I had a feeling she had more moves ready. 6 a.m. sharp. I'm outside installing my custom sign right next to their no fishing prohibition. The morning air is crisp, lake surface perfectly still, and I'm feeling more focused than I have in months. My sign reads, "Notice private marina facility, HOA members will be charged $300 per use for swimming, docking, or recreational activities. Fees payable immediately upon use. Legal enforcement will follow." I step back to admire the view. Two signs facing each other like opposing armies before a battle. Looking back, I still can't believe I actually went through with it. Part of me expected to chicken out at the last minute, but there I was planting my flag in the ground. The $300 fee wasn't random. I researched local marina rates, and that's what premium private docks charge for daily use. Within the first hour, neighbors start gathering. I watch from my kitchen window as they read my sign, then the HOA sign, then mine again. Their faces flipped from confusion to clarity, then something close to applause. Mrs. Thompson actually gives me a thumbs up and calls out, "Brilliant move, Reed," but not everyone's thrilled. A different neighbor from the corner house shakes his head disapprovingly. This kind of conflict is exactly what destroys neighborhood harmony. We need unity, not this escalating nonsense. I wasn't sure if I was being paranoid, but it felt like the whole neighborhood was picking sides based on a couple of signs. By 8 a.m., there's practically a crowd gathering at my marina, people taking photos with their phones and having heated discussions about property rights versus community standards. Mrs. Thompson fills me in on the neighborhood politics while we watch the drama unfold. Colleen's been president for 3 years now, and it's gone to her head. She used to be reasonable, but ever since her husband left last year, she's been using the HOA like her personal kingdom. The fishing ban isn't even in the official minutes. She just decided it on her own. That explains a lot. Divorced empty nest looking for purpose and control in all the wrong places. Mrs. Thompson continues. Last month she tried to fine the Williams family for having a vegetable garden that was too visible from the street. When they pointed out that the regulations don't prohibit gardens, she threatened to call a special meeting to create new rules specifically targeting their tomatoes. The absurdity would be funny if it wasn't ruining people's lives. She tells me about other incidents too. The Henderson family getting cited for their children's chalk drawings on their own driveway, claiming it was temporary signage requiring approval. The elderly couple on Maple Street who received a violation notice because their American flag was the wrong size for residential display. Apparently it needed to be exactly 3 feet by 5 feet, not the standard 4 feet by 6 feet they'd been flying for 20 years. "People are scared to do anything anymore," Mrs. Thompson whispers. "She's turned us into a police state where neighbors report each other for the smallest infractions." By late morning, a rumor started circulating. Someone claimed the marina used to be a shared HO, an easement before being accidentally privatized in a past title transfer. Totally false, but clever. That's when I knew Colleen wasn't just trying to scare me. She was planting a narrative. I had to strike back before it took root. By noon, someone has posted photos in our neighborhood social media group. The comments section explodes within minutes. "Wait, is this even legal? Good for Reed. The HOA has completely overstepped. This sets a dangerous precedent for property disputes. Hold up, is that actually his private marina?" I monitor the online debate without commenting. I stayed silent. Sometimes silence outspeaks every argument. My phone starts ringing non-stop. Unknown numbers neighbors. I barely know even a few people from other neighborhoods who somehow heard about the sign war. Most of the calls are supportive. Apparently Colleen has made enemies throughout the community with her heavy-handed enforcement tactics. One elderly gentleman tells me, "She fined us $200 because our mailbox was the wrong shade of blue, the wrong shade. We had to repaint it 3 times before she approved it." Another neighbor mentions getting cited for having their garbage cans visible from the street for more than 2 hours after pickup. I let most calls go to voicemail. That can't be right, can it? How does neighborhood drama spread this fast in the internet age? Finally, around 3 p.m., my phone rings with Colleen's name on the caller ID. I answer on the 4th ring just to make her wait. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Her voice is shaking, but not with fear, with pure rage. The professional demeanor from yesterday is completely gone. I'm applying exactly the same logic you used, Colleen. If the HOA can post regulatory signs on my private property for community benefit, then I can certainly charge the community for benefiting from my private property. Nobody swims or docks at that marina, so you're admitting it's my private marina and that nobody from the community actually uses it. Then please explain why you're banning me from fishing there. Long pause. I can practically hear the mental gears grinding as she tries to process the logical trap she just walked into. Just so we're completely clear, I continue. I've got the deed, the county map and tax receipts going back 20 years. This marina isn't theirs, it's mine down to the last nail in the dock. She hangs up without saying goodbye. Just click and dead silence. I actually had to stop and stare at my phone after that one. Who hangs up on someone in the middle of a property dispute? By evening, the neighborhood has split into two distinct camps. Half the residents think I'm a genius who finally stood up to HOA overreach. The other half think I'm a troublemaker destroying community peace over a petty dispute. Perfect, exactly the kind of pressure that forces decisive action. The social media debate has spread to 3 different neighborhood groups and even made it onto some local community forums. People are sharing photos, taking sides, debating property rights versus community standards. This little fishing dispute has become the talk of multiple neighborhoods. The formal notice arrives Wednesday evening, hand-delivered and taped to my front door. Emergency HOA meeting, mandatory attendance for all residents, Thursday, 7 p.m. As I read those words, I wondered if I'd just won the opening battle, or accidentally declared a war I wasn't prepared to fight. But if this was war, I'd bring receipts, and signs were just the beginning. Thursday evening, the community center is absolutely packed. I've never seen this many neighbors in one place. The controversy has drawn people who haven't attended an HOA meeting in years. Folding chairs are set up in rows that extend all the way to the back wall, and people are standing along the sides when the seats run out. The air conditioning system is struggling to keep up with the crowd, and you can feel the tension like humidity. Colleen sits at the head table looking exactly as expected, composed, cold clipboard clenched like a weapon. Every eye in the room tracks my movement as I walk in and take a seat in the back row. I wasn't sure if I was walking into a lynching or a celebration, but I figured I'd find out soon enough. The meeting starts with routine business budget updates, landscaping contracts, mailbox maintenance schedules. Colleen goes through the motions with mechanical precision, but you can see the tension in her shoulders the way she grips her gavel a little too tightly. The treasurer's report reveals some interesting information. The HO has spent over $8,000 this year on enforcement consulting fees, basically paying lawyers to intimidate residents into compliance. That's money that could have gone toward actual community improvements, like playground equipment or road repairs. But everyone's just waiting for the main event. You can see people checking their phones, whispering to each other, glancing back at me every few minutes. Some residents have clearly taken sides already. There's a group near the front that keeps nodding approvingly at everything Colleen says, while folks in the back are shooting disapproving looks toward the head table. Finally, a retired teacher who's lived here for 15 years stands up. We simply cannot allow residents to post whatever signs they want, wherever they want them. There have to be rules, standards, and order, or we'll have chaos. Several people nod in agreement. It's actually a reasonable point, which makes this more challenging. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, maybe I really am the troublemaker here. Maybe I should have just found somewhere else to fish and avoided all this drama. The teacher continues. What's next? Political signs, commercial advertisements, signs promoting inappropriate activities. The way she says inappropriate activities makes it sound like I'm running some kind of illegal gambling operation instead of just trying to fish in peace. But then Colleen launches into her presentation, and all my doubts disappear. She launches into a 10-minute presentation about community standards, property value protection, and preventing the dangerous precedent of residents taking unilateral action against established HOA authority. She's good at this professional, authoritative, reasonable sounding. She makes me sound like some rogue homeowner trying to undermine legitimate community governance. Her PowerPoint slides include photos of my Marina, copies of neighborhood regulations, and even property value statistics from surrounding communities. I sit quietly through the entire presentation, letting her build her case as thoroughly as possible. Looking back, I should have known she'd try to make me look like the villain, but hearing it in person still caught me off guard. When she finishes, there's scattered applause from about a third of the room. When it's my turn, I stand up carrying a manila folder and walk calmly to the front of the room. The walk feels like it takes forever, every footstep echoing in the suddenly silent space. Thank you for that presentation, Colleen. I'd like to address several factual errors and provide some important legal clarification. I'm speaking slowly, clearly making eye contact with people throughout the room. First, let me read the exact HOA regulation that was cited to justify banning fishing at my marina. I quote Section 4.7 about maintaining community standards. Now, if fishing at my marina supposedly violates community standards, then swimming, docking, or any other recreational activities there would create identical violations under the same regulation. Correct murmurs ripple through the room. People are following the logical progression, thank God. Some folks are nodding, others are frowning as they realize the implications. Second, if the HOA claims management authority to post regulatory signs on my private property for community benefit, then I absolutely have the legal right to charge for that community benefit. Basic property law. Richard Patterson, who's been completely silent all evening, suddenly speaks from the middle of the room. Colleen, I need to ask directly, are you certain that Marina is community property under HOA jurisdiction? Richard's been a lawyer for 40 years before retiring, and when he speaks, people listen. Colleen responds with complete confidence. Absolutely all waterfront areas fall under HOA management authority according to our community bylaws and regulations. The room buzzes with conversation. That can't be right, can it? I mean, I bought the house specifically because the marina was private property. Several neighbors are looking confused, others are shaking their heads. Here's where things get interesting. Here's the map stamped by the county. Anyone who still doubts I own that dock can take it up with the assessor's office. I spread the documents across the presentation table, making sure everyone can see the official seals and signatures. Even the AC hum cut out, or maybe my ears just stopped hearing. That's silent. Richard walks up to examine the documents, closely puts on his reading glasses, and studies the survey map for what feels like an eternity. These appear to be official county records with proper certification. Colleen, it looks like we may have made a significant error here. I saw it in their eyes. That moment of collective shift. 100 tiny recalibrations as neighbors realized the emperor had no jurisdiction. Colleen's supporters started shrinking into their chairs. The ones who had been silent now looked toward me like I'd just spoken their language for the first time. It wasn't just mood, it was momentum. The room tipped like a boat leaning away from her. People start whispering to each other. Several residents are shaking their heads at Colleen. Mrs. Thompson calls out from the back. So, Reed was completely right all along. Even if the marina is technically private property, Colleen says desperately, the HOA still maintains authority over activities that could affect community aesthetics and property values. Richard stands up with the dignity of someone who's spent decades in courtrooms. No, Colleen. If it's verified private property, we have no regulatory authority there whatsoever. We need to remove our sign immediately and issue a formal apology. The applause starts slowly, then builds to a roar. People are standing up. Some are even cheering. All residents in favor of removing the HOA fishing prohibition and apologizing to Reed for the error. Some did it fast, defiantly. Others hesitated, glancing between Colleen and the papers on the table. But when the final hand went up, a quiet woman from 3 houses down, who never spoke at meetings, that was it. 28 votes to 6. Colleen's clipboard lowered like a flag on a defeated ship. Colleen's face is bright red, and she's gripping her pen so hard her knuckles are white. Walking to my car after the meeting, I should have felt completely victorious, but the look in Colleen's eyes as I passed her table told me everything I needed to know. This woman would rather burn the entire neighborhood down than admit she was wrong, and for the first time I started wondering if she just might try. I know Colleen's personality type. She's not going to accept public humiliation gracefully. She's the kind of person who doubles down when cornered instead of cutting her losses. So, I prepare for inevitable retaliation. The next morning, I'm at the hardware store buying security equipment. Nothing fancy, but enough to protect my property and document whatever crazy scheme she's probably cooking up. I install a simple wireless security camera with night vision capability positioned to monitor the marina area from multiple angles. Just an $89 camera from the electronics store, but it sends motion alerts to my phone and records everything to cloud storage. I wasn't sure if I was being paranoid or just cautious, but something told me Colleen wasn't done with me yet. Here's where I get a little creative. I coat my sign with invisible UV powder, the same stuff they use to catch package thieves and shoplifters. You can buy it online for like $20. Anyone who touches the sign gets the powder on their hands, which glows bright purple under UV light but is completely invisible otherwise. It's harmless, but impossible to wash off completely for several hours. 2 nights later, at exactly 2:47 a.m., my security system pinged. One glance was all I needed. He was back, tools in hand, moving like he'd done this 100 times. I recognize him from previous neighborhood work. Older guy, probably just following orders, but still committing a crime on camera. Looking back, I still can't believe she actually sent someone to mess with my sign in the middle of the night. I mean, seriously, this is what we're doing now? The camera captures everything in perfect detail. The contractor carefully removing my sign and replacing it with a new HOA sign reading, "No fishing, no swimming, no docking, HOA property, only violators will be prosecuted." The irony is absolutely perfect. They're still claiming my private marina as HOA property, even after the meeting, where official county documents proved otherwise. Part of me wanted to storm out and scream, but another part, the smarter part, wanted the whole thing on tape. The video quality is crystal clear, showing his face, the license plate on his truck, even the HOA logo on his work shirt. Maybe I should have stopped him right then and there, but something told me to let this play out. Sometimes you have to let people hang themselves with their own rope. At 8 a.m. sharp, I call the police. Someone trespassed on my private property overnight and vandalized my legal signage. I have video evidence of the crime in progress. The dispatcher sounds skeptical at first, probably thinking this is some minor neighborhood squabble. But when I mention video evidence and property damage, her tone changes completely. An officer arrives within 30 minutes, a professional-looking woman in her 30s who takes the complaint seriously from the start. I show her the crystal-clear video footage of the contractor removing my legal sign and installing the HOA's unauthorized replacement. This appears to be straightforward trespassing and property damage, she says after reviewing the evidence. Do you want to press charges? Absolutely. I have documentation proving this is my private property and the video shows deliberate vandalism. Within an hour, both Colleen and the maintenance contractor show up with the police officer. Colleen immediately tries to control the narrative. "Officer, this is clearly a community dispute that should be handled through proper HOA channels, not criminal complaints." The officer cuts her off. "Ma'am, property damage and trespassing are criminal matters regardless of any community dispute. Mr. Reed has clear video evidence and ownership documentation." The contractor looks terrified. Colleen looks furious but confident, like she's got some ace up her sleeve. "Officer, I also have physical evidence proving that the contractor handled my original sign." I pull out a small UV flashlight, the type that CSI shows have made famous. "Sir, would you mind showing us your hands?" When the UV light hits the contractor's palms, they glow bright purple with perfect handprint patterns. The UV powder transfer is undeniable. The guy breaks immediately. "Colleen told me to do it. She said the signs were illegal and needed to be corrected according to HOA authority. I didn't know it was criminal." Colleen's face goes white as a sheet. "I absolutely never said any such thing. He must have completely misunderstood his instructions." Before she could deny it, I hit play on my phone. Her voice filled the air. "Do it after dark so nobody sees you. Make sure you don't leave any evidence." The officer's eyes narrowed like a lens tightening. "So, you instructed unauthorized entry onto private property," Colleen stuttered. I didn't look away. Neither did the dozen neighbors now gathered behind me, drawn by the sirens. Phones out, recording. This was no longer a HOA dispute. It was a public reckoning. Colleen's face goes completely white. The contractor looks like he wants to disappear into the ground. Richard Patterson, who heard the commotion from across the street, walks over with the measured pace of someone who's seen this type of situation before. "Officer, I saw someone on my neighbor's property around 3 a.m. last night. Thought it was strange but didn't want to interfere with what I assumed was authorized maintenance." Richard's testimony carries extra weight because of his legal background and reputation in the community. The evidence is overwhelming: video footage, physical evidence, audio recording, and witness testimony. You could probably convict someone of murder with less evidence than what I've got here. But here's where things get really interesting. The officer starts asking Colleen more detailed questions about the HOA's authority to post signs on private property. "Ma'am, do you have any documentation showing that the HOA has jurisdiction over this particular marina?" Colleen stammers something about community bylaws and aesthetic standards, but she can't produce any specific legal authority. And you instructed this contractor to remove Mr. Reed's sign and replace it with an HOA sign. The audio recording makes denial impossible. Ma'am, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit criminal trespassing and directing property damage. The cuffs clicked soft hollow, like punctuation at the end of her rule. A neighbor across the street live-streamed it without shame. The title, HOA President Arrested for Vandalism, You Won't Believe Why. Within minutes, it hit 3,000 views. Seeing her cuffed in daylight under neighbor stares should have felt like justice. It just felt done. This woman had destroyed her own life over a fishing sign. As the officer reached for her citation book and started writing up formal charges, I realized this moment would either end Colleen's reign of neighborhood terror forever, or turn me into the villain who destroyed a woman's life over a fishing sign dispute. Colleen had fallen hard, but power doesn't disappear. It regroups. With video evidence, UV powder-proof audio recording, and witness testimony, the case against Colleen is completely airtight. She's formally charged with conspiracy to commit criminal trespassing, directing property damage, and filing false police reports. She tried, claiming the contractor acted independently, even after we played the audio recording. The contractor gets charged with trespassing and vandalism, but his cooperation with police helps reduce his sentence to community service and a small fine. The board calls an immediate meeting to address what they diplomatically term the leadership crisis. With Richard Patterson serving as interim moderator, they vote to remove Colleen as president. Final tally, 31 votes for removal, 3 votes to retain. I wasn't sure if I should feel vindicated or sorry for her at this point, but the relief on everyone's faces told the whole story. Richard is unanimously elected as interim president. His first official act, publicly apologizing to me and formally recognizing my property rights in the official HOA minutes. The apology is read aloud at the next community meeting and posted on the neighborhood website. Colleen pleads guilty to avoid the public spectacle of a trial. Final sentence, $5,000, fine, 40 hours of community service, and permanent prohibition from holding any HOA office for 5 years. No jail time, but the public humiliation cuts deeper than any fine could. But the courtroom wasn't the end. Her name trended on local news sites for a week. People started reposting the footage of her being cuffed, adding text overlays like, "Meet your HOA queen." What she lost wasn't just her title. It was her ability to be invisible again. The woman who ruled through fear and intimidation has become the neighborhood cautionary tale. Looking back, I almost feel bad about how completely everything fell apart for her. Almost. But then I remember Mrs. Thompson's terrified expression and all the other families she'd bullied over the years. Both the illegal no-fishing sign and the fraudulent HOA property replacement are officially removed in a brief ceremony. My marina returns to its natural peaceful state. The water looks clearer somehow, the sunset more beautiful. Maybe it's just psychological, but everything feels lighter without that stupid red sign glaring at me every morning. Several families approach me after neighborhood gatherings. Thank you for having the courage to stand up to her. We were too intimidated to fight back, but watching you inspired us. Mrs. Thompson handed me a plate of cookies and just said, "Took guts." That said more than any speech. I'm not even sure why their approval means so much to me, but it does. Maybe because standing up to bullies is scary, and knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Under Richard's management, the HOA becomes genuinely helpful instead of punitive. Monthly meetings become optional and productive, focused on actual community improvements like road maintenance and security lighting instead of petty enforcement actions. Rules focus on actual safety issues, not aesthetic micromanagement. All decisions require transparent community voting with advance notice and public discussion. No more fines with no warning. No more rules written mid-punishment. No more secret decisions made by power-hungry individuals. I've transformed from someone who actively avoided HOA involvement to someone neighbors actually seek out for advice on dealing with bureaucratic overreach. Richard occasionally asks my input on proposed regulations. Reed, does this sound reasonable, or does it sound like something Colleen would have pushed through? It used to be that neighbors avoided each other. Now they ask questions, sometimes hard ones. Meetings don't feel like interrogations anymore. They feel like town halls. It didn't make sense at the time how much everything changed, but sometimes removing one toxic person really does fix the entire system. That first evening back at my marina after everything settled, casting my line into the calm water while watching the sunset, pure tranquility. No signs, no drama, no power-hungry officials lurking around corners. The bass are biting again too, like they can sense the peace. Neighbors who barely acknowledged my existence before now smile and wave when they pass by. Not because I'm some local celebrity, but because I demonstrated that standing up for principles doesn't require being aggressive or unreasonable. Word of our situation has spread through social media and local networks. I've received messages from people in other communities dealing with similar HOA overreach, asking for advice and encouragement. Apparently, power-hungry HOA presidents are more common than I thought. 3 months of perfect peace had convinced me this chapter of my life was permanently closed, but the text message that arrived on a quiet Tuesday evening proved that sometimes your biggest personal victory becomes the beginning of something much larger than you ever imagined. And I could feel it starting already with one message, one creek, one fight at a time. I'm sitting at my marina on a perfect evening fishing line cast into golden water. When I read the message, "Hi Reed, this is Maria Anderson from Riverside County. I heard about your HOA situation through our neighborhood network. Our HOA is trying to ban vegetable gardens in front yards, claiming they're aesthetically inappropriate. I'm desperate for advice on fighting this. Can you help?" Apparently, my little victory has inspired others dealing with power-hungry HOAs across multiple counties. It's strange how quickly a neighborhood story becomes someone's blueprint in another state. Happy to help. First question: do you legally own your front yard, or is it actually HOA common area? Always start with verifying property ownership through county records. Never assume the HOA is telling the truth about what they actually control. Similar messages keep arriving. A retired teacher in Nevada fighting flower pot restrictions on private balconies. A young father in Oregon whose HOA banned basketball hoops on private driveways because they create noise disturbances. A grandmother in Texas battling over bird feeder regulations that supposedly attract undesirable wildlife. Each story has its own unique details, but the pattern is always the same. Someone in a position of minor authority deciding that their personal preferences should become everyone else's mandatory compliance. There's something deeply troubling about how quickly neighborhood associations turn into miniature dictatorships when the wrong person gets elected to the board. Every story follows the same pattern: petty tyrants drunk on microscopic amounts of power, systematically bullying people who just want to live peacefully in their own homes. The details change, but the psychology is always identical. Someone who feels powerless in other areas of their life using HOA authority to control their neighbors. I've started keeping a spreadsheet of all the cases I'm helping, with tracking common violations, successful resistance strategies, and legal precedents that might help future cases. The data is fascinating in a disturbing way. Noise complaints, aesthetic violations, and unauthorized modifications are the most common pretexts for HOA overreach, but the real motivation is almost always about control and power rather than legitimate community concerns. I'm not a lawyer and never claimed to be, but I've learned the most crucial lesson: proper documentation defeats intimidation every single time. Know your exact property boundaries, read your actual HOA documents thoroughly, and never let bullies scare you into surrendering rights you legitimately possess. The internet has become an incredibly powerful tool for sharing these strategies. What used to be isolated homeowner complaints can now become coordinated resistance movements with legal backing and community support. I wasn't sure if becoming some kind of informal HOA consultant was what I wanted, but helping people fight back against abuse feels right somehow. Each success story creates a ripple effect, people sharing strategies, documenting violations, building coalitions within their communities. The internet has made it impossible for petty tyrants to operate in isolation. Now, when an HOA president tries to ban something ridiculous, residents can quickly research similar cases and learn effective resistance strategies. 6 months later, I'm sitting in a local coffee shop checking messages from 3 different families I'm helping, when a familiar voice behind me says quietly, "I heard you've become some kind of HOA expert now." I turn around. It's Colleen. She looks fundamentally different. Not physically, but the aura of authority and intimidation has completely disappeared. She seems like a regular person now, maybe even a little fragile. The sharp business attire is gone, replaced by casual clothes and a softer demeanor. "I didn't mean for everything to escalate that far," she says, sitting down without invitation. She looks smaller now, not just physically like someone whose spine had been taken by consequences. But I didn't interrupt. I wanted to hear where this version of her would go. After I retired from the bank, the HOA presidency was the only place where I felt important anymore, where people had to listen to what I said. There's something almost vulnerable in her admission, like she's finally seeing herself clearly for the first time. Part of me wants to stay angry, remind her of all the families she bullied over petty violations. But looking at her now, I mostly feel tired. The anger that drove me through months of conflict has faded into something more like pity. Colleen, you had real power to genuinely help people. You could have made this neighborhood better for everyone who lives here. Instead, you used that authority to make people afraid of you. She nods, slowly, doesn't argue or make excuses. The defensive arrogance is completely gone. I understand that now. I'm truly sorry for how I handled everything. Apology accepted. But next time you have any kind of authority over other people, remember exactly how it felt to have someone abuse their power over you. I watched her walk away with that slumped posture of someone who used to be feared. But I also knew she'd be back in some boardroom, eventually trying again under a different name. People like Colleen don't vanish. They rebrand. She walks away quietly, and I realize something important. Winning isn't just about defeating the bully. It's about ensuring they understand why their behavior was wrong, so they don't repeat it elsewhere. Sometimes the best victory is helping someone become a better person. I've now helped 14 different families across 9 states deal with various forms of HOA overreach. Always as a fellow homeowner who's been through the process, never as professional legal advice. The strategy is always the same: document absolutely everything, verify your property rights through official sources, maintain professionalism even when provoked, never let intimidation tactics work. And remember that most neighborhood tyrants are paper tigers once someone stands up to them properly. I finally accepted Richard's invitation to join the HO. Aboard permanently, but with strict conditions, completely transparent meetings, no surprise. Rule changes, and a formal appeals process for any fines or restrictions. Democracy works when people actually participate instead of just complaining from the sidelines. Our HOA has become a model that other communities study. Property values have increased, neighbor complaints have virtually disappeared, and people actually look forward to meetings because we solve problems instead of creating them. I'm at my marina on a gorgeous Sunday evening, teaching my neighbor's 9-year-old daughter how to cast a fishing line. Her parents sit nearby on folding chairs, completely relaxed and happy. The kid's got natural talent. Her first cast goes farther than most adults manage. "Mr. Reed," she asks, with serious 9-year-old curiosity, "why was that lady so mean about fishing before?" Some people think having power means telling others what they can't do. I explain while helping her adjust her grip. But real power is helping people do what makes them happy, as long as they're not hurting anyone else. She nods thoughtfully, then gets distracted by a fish jumping near the far shore. Watching her cast with growing confidence, I understand what this entire experience really taught me. Most people accept being pushed around because fighting back seems harder than just giving in and hoping the problem goes away. But sometimes, just sometimes, standing up to one bully doesn't just change your own life. It changes the lives of everyone around you who were too scared to speak up. My phone currently has 4 new messages from people dealing with HO. Problems, a dinner invitation from several neighbor families, and a photo from Maria in Riverside County showing off her thriving front yard vegetable garden with a sign reading, "Community beauty through diversity." Not bad for a guy who just wanted to fish in peace. So, I built a guide, a real one, not just how to fight back, but how to build a community that doesn't need to. And maybe that's the part that sticks with me most. I didn't plan to be anyone's example, I just wanted my peace back. But somehow, pushing back on one overreach gave others permission to draw their own lines too. Maybe the real lesson here is it only takes one person with proof patience and a spine to show a neighborhood how to push back. If you're still here, I'd love to hear your thoughts.